Was that okay? Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nic Harcourt, and Robbie Robertson is here. So we've still got the credits rolling behind us, but before we do anything, how did you enjoy the film? Let's start by talking a little bit about the inspiration for this movie, which was when you decided to write the first volume of your memoirs, Testimony. Tell us a little bit about that. When did you first think, maybe it's time for me to tell my story?
Well, I had some writers over time come to me and say, let me write your story. And I tried it 2 or 3 times. And at some point I said, this doesn't feel right. The writings, it felt like somebody doing an impersonation or something of what I was, I don't know. I couldn't feel what they were trying to do. And finally I thought, I'm going to have to do this myself. And I did have a sense that it was a lot of work, but it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And after writing this book, then people came to me and said, we want to do a documentary based on your book. And so that's how this whole thing got stirred up.
When you started writing the book, as you said, people had tried writing it for you originally. Was it something that you'd been thinking of for a while? I mean, how long did it take you to get around to writing the book?
I don't know. I just had other stuff to do. And I thought, I don't want to tell my, and I, for a long time I thought I was too young. I was too wrong, like, oh my God, I'm going to write my story. And I'm, but anyway, I finally caught up with that. I finally, and I couldn't avoid it anymore. So, but I had to go into the zone. I had to go to a place to write and recall and to tell these stories, in the way that I would tell them. And it isn't winging it. And I actually wrote this book. Nobody else wrote it. A lot of people say they write these books and everything, but I actually sweated this out, and I'm really glad I did.
Did you give yourself office hours? Did you sit down for a certain amount of hours every day to write, or did you give a concentrated amount of time? How long did it take you to write the book?
It happened over a period of time because I was working on other Scorsese movies, and I was making records, and I was just doing many other things. So it wasn't like I could just go to the cabin in the woods and just write until I was done. Wasn't like that. I had to do it over a period of time. And that worked out, actually, because I just found a rhythm. I found a way to, I think, to tell these stories in a very honest way. And that didn't happen just like that.
When you write a song, do you start with something and then know where the middle is and know where the end is? I mean, what's the process for writing a book? Did you know the stories you were going to put in this book? Did you have a place where you were going to start and a place to finish?
It's always, I think anyway, a process of discovery. That you sit down and you think, I'm going to write a song, and nothing happens. And then when you've just about given up, you sit down one day and you put your fingers on that piano and something happens and you discover something. And it was the same feeling in writing the book. I'd sit, and I would write something and I would be like, that's not what I want to say. Or that's not the feeling that I'm trying to share, to really get across. So, like anything else, there's a a process that is very much trial and error. But when it starts to roll, and when you start to think, I'm on it, I'm feeling this thing, whether it's in music or a book or a movie or anything else, you think, oh my God, my feet aren't touching the ground.
You're just going to ride it.
You just ride it, yeah.
So when it came time to think about turning the book into a movie, I think you said to me, we spoke about this a couple of days ago, that there were a number of people who came to you and said that they wanted to do the movie. And I know that you talked to a few people and it didn't feel right. But then a young guy comes to you, Daniel, from Toronto, 24-year-old guy, and says, I'd like to do this. Tell us about that, how you guys connected.
There's that gut feeling with somebody, and that you think, this doesn't sound right on paper. You don't, to tell a story of somebody that's been on a journey like me, you don't ask a 24-year-old guy to do it. It's like, what does he know? What does he, and the people, the producers on the film and everything, they were like, he can't do this. He doesn't know this period of time. He doesn't understand this era. He's got nothing in this to work with. But I don't know what it is. You just have a feeling, and like I told you before, when he said he was 24 years old, I thought I was 24 years old when I made music from Big Pink. Let's give this a whirl. So,
There's a moment early on in the movie where you mention that you think about Levon, Richard, Rick, and Garth all the time. It's been a long time since the band, obviously, and a lot of water under the bridge, and towards the end of the movie, we see some of the things that happened afterwards. But when you say you think of them all the time, give me an example of that. I mean, something happened during the day where something will trigger a memory of being with the guys or one of them. What do you mean when you say you think of them all the time?
Yeah, it's just those little reminders that something happens, and it was like, oh God, I remember, when Rick said that, or when we went there together, or things, they're just constant memories. And we spent, over 16 years of our lives in this brotherhood. And we went to dangerous, crazy places together, and we survived. So you kind of think of, these people, the guys in the band, and Bob Dylan too. It's almost like we were war buddies. You know what I mean? We went through hell and back together and actually figured out how to make it work. And that's magical. And when something is that enlightening in your journey, you can't help but it just keep coming back to you. And I have so many fond, loving memories of what we did together that it feels good to go there. And while I was making this new record that I made, Cinematic, again, I sat down one day to write a song. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I was just hoping, like you always do, something would come to you. And I sat down and I started playing these chords, and this melody came to me. And I wrote this song, Once We're Brothers. And it really was something celebrating and commemorating this brotherhood. And in the meantime, over here, they were making this documentary. So that's helped spur that on. And then with my other hand, I was doing the music for The Irishman. So there's some of that in the album too. And the way all of these things started feeding off each other turned out, it's like, I have never done that before. Usually you think, okay, I'm working on this, I'll put that over there. and this. I don't want to get confused. I want to concentrate on that when I'm doing it. All these things. This time, I just opened my arms and I just pulled it all in, and everything, complemented and contributed to the other. And so, at this stage of doing what I'm doing, I certainly appreciate that kind of inspiration and enlightenment.
You were also working on compiling the band box set as well. So over this 2-year period, your album, the box set, the music for The Irishman, and this film. There's a lot of. How did you manage all that stuff?
And I'm writing volume 2 of my memoir. So yeah, it's been like
busy
one of
guy.
The busiest years of my life, and I don't know. I think that's good medicine.
Let me ask you about the process then of this movie. Obviously, once you put Daniel Roman to direct it, my guess is that he went out and started shooting interviews with the people we see on the screen. But you also handed over a treasure trove of material, right? Photographs, old films. Was it just a lot of stuff that you had? I mean, did you just throw it to him and say, "Good luck, see what's in there," or did you know what you wanted him to dig out of your collection?
I didn't edit anything. I just, said, "Well, I've got this. I've got this storage space, and my son Sebastian, he has the key to it. So he showed him where some of the stuff was, and he went in there with such a curiosity, and he came out with stuff that I hadn't thought of or remembered in so long, and that was kind of a joyous feeling too. So yeah.
And you were hands off for the first 80% of this movie, right? You just sort of let him go with it.
I didn't want to micromanage it. I was busy with all this other stuff too. I couldn't micromanage it, but Jared Levine, my manager, he was kind of watching the store and making sure it wasn't going somewhere that he knew that I'd be like, "Whoa, what's that about?" And he was feeling that Daniel, his dedication and his hunger to do this really well was going somewhere. So anyway, I just got out of the way and thought, do a good job.
Where was the movie at when you saw the first assembly? How much of it was complete as to what we saw on the screen tonight?
It was a complete rough cut, but a lot evolved after that. And then pretty soon, Imagine Entertainment came in to the fold with Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, and they came in. They had a good feeling about what Daniel was doing, but their experience and they're so good at what they do.
They've made a few movies.
And so they also brought in people that they work with and helped raise the bar. And then there was a rough cut that Martin Scorsese saw, and he said, "Whoa, I think this is turning out really good. If you want me to help out on this, I'd be happy to." So then Marty started giving us some input, and then the team, everything just started to glow and rise, and we thought maybe we're onto something here.
Are there any moments in the movie, any scenes that perhaps you hadn't seen for a long time, or ever for that matter, that struck you when you watched that first assembly?
Well, there was no scenes that it's not like that there's scenes, but there was a lot of images and things, and there was a lot of you know, really, really special moments and beautiful times, you know, that Dominique, you know, and she's so great in the film, and what she kind of lifted to a place too, and helped remember, and talking about that period of time, you know, because we were living in my world, but her background, you know, her sensibility to art and poetry and literature and music and everything from her culture ended up being a fantastic, you know, a fantastic thing from me to grow from and learn from and embrace. And so that was part of the magic that I remember quite a bit when we're watching this.
Yeah, when I said scenes, of course, I misspoke. I was really thinking about just bits of film, perhaps, that you hadn't seen for a long time. Some of the stuff from Woodstock, like the experimental movie that we see in there that you made. Other moments when you're in Big Pink, you know, the photographs of you guys making those early recordings. If there was anything in there that you hadn't seen that perhaps struck you as like, oh wow, just taking you back.
I'll tell you something that maybe you don't recognize in this black and white footage that comes up, and it is kind of telling a story of what's going on in the film. And there are these guys in this film, and the guy who's mainly in it is Michael J. Pollard from Bonnie and Clyde. You know, this fantastic actor, and he lived up in Woodstock, and he was hanging out, and I was experimenting with this black and white. I got this great Beaulieu French 8mm camera, and I was experimenting, hoping I was going to impress Ingmar Bergman at some point. But anyway, it's Michael J. Pollard and Leslie West from Mountain and Mason Hoffenberg, who co-wrote Candy with Terry Southern. I mean, you couldn't put these names together in a dream, let alone in real life. And they were just friends of ours and were around and were just game for experimenting.
There's a moment in the movie where you talk about you realize that moment that you were in the middle of a musical revolution. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Well, I think that what I was referring to at that time is when we were traveling around playing all over North America and Australia and Europe, and people were booing us every night and sometimes throwing stuff at us. And we were playing our hearts out. And Bob was, I mean, he was pouring it on. There was no energy left, you know, and outside. It was all just, and nobody, it seemed, wanted it except us. And it was going to take some time for this to connect. And in that kind of a process, you realize you're really going against the wind here. And this is what a musical revolution feels like, because it went on to be tremendously influential and changed the course of music history.
I love that moment where you guys get in a car after a show and Dylan's saying, "Don't boo me."
Yeah.
And then goes on to say, how come they buy the tickets so fast?
Yeah.
It's almost like they were buying the tickets to come and see the revolution, but they didn't particularly like it.
Right.
And obviously, you had that experience twice. The first in the States, and then when you did it again in Europe and came back. There's another scene in the movie that really struck me when you're talking, and I think you're sitting down at the Village, perhaps, and you're looking at your Martin guitar, and you talk about Nazareth and how the weight came together. And I know I asked you about this just a couple of days ago, but you guys didn't hear it. I think it's just such a beautiful story. of you not having that inspiration in the moment until you saw the word Nazareth. Take us through that again, if you don't mind.
Well, it's again, you know, and we keep coming back to this thing of in writing, you know, like I say in the beginning of the film, it's such a blank canvas, and you have no idea what you're going to do, what you're going to think of, and you just hope that something comes up. But you do look for some kind of a clue, something that'll spark it for you. And I was sitting there and I was messing around and nothing was coming, and I couldn't think of anything that I thought was, you know, worthwhile. And I was sitting there and the guitar was sitting on my lap, and I saw inside the guitar, it says Nazareth, Pennsylvania. And I thought, wow, Nazareth, Pennsylvania. That's kind of like the Nazareth that we all know about in a biblical form. And I just wrote that line. I pulled into Nazareth just because of that. And once I had that line, it just sailed off, and I just followed it.
You also followed it with another great line, which was, "I was feeling about half past dead," which has got to be one of the greatest lines ever, I think. And I get the opportunity to say this when I hang out with Robbie, that "The Wait" for me is one of the greatest songs ever written. So I say that as a fan. So we only have a couple of minutes left, unfortunately, but let's just come up to date a little bit, I guess. Move towards the end of the film, obviously, which is the last waltz. And you guys just all watched it, and I'm sure you've actually seen the movie as well. But when you set out to do the last waltz, as you say in the film, it wasn't meant to be the end of the band. It was just that moment in time where it's like, let's just stop. We'll do something really special, and then maybe we'll come back to it. But you never did. Do you feel any regrets about that you guys weren't able to make music again?
Yeah, I did, and I really believed that in the last waltz we were just bringing our journey to the end of that chapter. That we were really just putting the road aside. The road started to feel like a very dangerous place at that time, and every time we went out there was all these kind of creepy people saying, "Hey man, you want something? You come on over here." You know, it was that feeling like, geez, this is like just walking into the devil's den or something. And the idea was, let's not walk into the fire. Let's do something different. And we've had such an amazing journey on this. That was when it was 16 years. Let's bring this to a culmination in the name of music and these great friends of ours and artists, and getting Martin Scorsese to direct this and everything. It just seemed like a beautiful celebration of music. And then after that, some of the guys wanted to make records and do other things, like Levon says in the film. And we were just waiting for some time to pass until everybody got some kind of fulfillment outside of, you know, being in this brotherhood all the time. And we had a plan to come together and talk about what we could do and what we wanted to do, what we needed to do. And we went for this meeting, and I was the only one that showed up. And so I just thought at that time, I guess that's just the way it is, and I'm going to have to read the writing on the wall here. And it finally, it took a while, but it finally sunk into me that I guess it's not meant to be, to continue, and everybody's doing stuff that they want to do and you know, love to do, and so I'm going to have to let it alone. And so I had to let that dream just, fade away.
Well, and clearly you've been very busy in the years between making records and obviously working in film an awful lot. And I know that you're working on another film right now. But you mentioned there's going to be another volume of your memoirs, and I presume you started on it by the sound of things.
Yes.
What's the time period you're going to cover in the next round?
I'm not positive yet. I'm just starting the story. After I wrote this book and it came out, and the publishing company was very happy the way it went. It was a New York Times bestseller, and they, thought it turned out really good. And I thought, whew, wow, got that done. And not too much time passed, and they said, you can't write your story and have it end when you're 32. And I thought, ay, here we go again. So anyway, I am picking up the story there, and I'm writing, and I'm just feeling my way as I go along, and I hope it's not as hard as last time, but I've got a feeling it's gonna hurt.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I want to ask everybody before we wrap up, Robbie has to be somewhere, like literally right after this, so I'm going to ask you to let him leave the theater, and they do have to obviously get another screening in here, I think, as well. But Robbie Robertson,